Well, hello and welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. My name is Liz Robbins, and I am joined today by Bryan Ackerman in the studio today. It's great to have you here, Bryan.
Yes, good to be here.
We were going to have you and both your wife as well on, and you guys had an emergency, a sick kid, which many of us feel that very deeply. So unfortunately, we don't have Meg with us today, but we love Meg, and we are going to do our best to channel all of her wisdom as we've prepared for this episode. This is a topic that is very near and dear to our families. And for those who've been listening throughout the week, they know that this whole week's been about sex and sexuality today, how to navigate that in 2025, which is no joke. And today, specifically, we want to talk about parents and how they should be talking to their kids about sex. I think the title is something like what is the talk, in quotes, and when should you have it or how should you have it? And so Bryan and I are going to really, hopefully, just encourage and also, I think, challenge parents and listeners in this area, but hopefully mostly encourage them to recognize how important this is and also how it doesn't have to be so scary, and it absolutely should not wait until the teen years. So before we dive in, Bryan, I'll just give the listeners just our basic outline. I like to give an outline just so people know where we're going. So we're going to start really with just the why question. Why should we talk to our kids about this? Why is it important? And also God's heart about this. We want to kind of unpack that a little bit. And then towards the end of the show, kind of get into some of the age ranges where you could expect to have talked about fill in the blank by this age. And I know, Bryan, when we were preparing for this, you were saying as a guy, you really liked having like an outline that tells me like, okay, this is what I got to cover. This is what I got to talk about. So it's not just this
I like
big...
to check the boxes. Okay,
yes.
By this age, you should talk about these kind of things. And
Yeah. So we're going to do our best to cover, this is quite a topic, but what we're hoping to do here is encourage you that it is so important to get in front of this. The sooner the better. And it doesn't have to be something that you're scared of. And sex in general isn't something that we should shy away from talking to our kids about. Right?
Because it's normal. It's a part of life. It's a part of development. It's a part of humanity.
Yeah.
And so why should this be a weird, shame-filled thing,
Yeah. So, I think it's interesting, and maybe it's because I have a science background, so I'm a big nerd, and I love biology in all its forms. And I think, I have 3 kids. You guys have 4 kids. You've got preteens, elementary school, all the way down to preschool.
Yep.
I've got a teenager. I feel like that's like a badge of honor.
Wow.
I've got myself a teenager. I told her I was doing this show. I was like, so you have a math test today? That's cool. Do you know what I'm going to be doing? She was like, what? And I was like, I'm going to talk to people about how to talk to your kids about sex. And she gave me the biggest eye roll that I have ever seen. It was so beautiful. And I was like, I didn't pick the topic, but I'm actually looking forward to it. And she goes, of course you are. So that can tell you that I've leaned into this with my kids. And you guys are too. So, and that's why we have you here, Bryan. And we were going to have Meg also, but because you guys also have done a lot of research. Your wife, who's not here, but she's a therapist. She treats and counsels teens and kids on all types of issues. So let's talk about the why. Why is it important for parents to talk to their kids? And I first want to just go at it from what you just said, which is that this is a natural part of the design of the body. God designed bodies. He designed physical bodies. And yet, because the world is broken, we see that early on in Genesis, sex was abused. We see, we consider like Hagar, what happened with Hagar. Like early on in human history, sex is broken. and human sexuality is broken. So because of that, none of us are really coming at this from a whole healthy place. I think that's important for parents to understand. And I don't know, what has been your experience before having kids? And now you've got kids and you've got to figure out how to talk about this in a way that kind of honors God. Like, what can you say about that?
Well, first of all, before you have kids, you never think about having this talk with anyone for any reason, So I think it's totally normal. And I like what you said is that no one's coming into this with a clean slate. Like all of us parents have baggage. We have, as many stars as there are in the sky, we all have had our own unique experiences in this regard. Brokenness, shame from our past, shame from our parents. What did our parents talk to us about? Did we go to public school? How did they talk about it? Like there's so much that we all bring to the table. And so it's sort of a separation and an objectivity that we want to look for and how we're going to approach this with our children that's not based on my brokenness, because otherwise we might swing in the other direction and might be like, well, because I was raised like this, I'm definitely not going to do it like that. And I'm going to go all the way over here and do that.
Almost like reactionary, right?
Yeah. And so it's just really taking the time. And that's why I like so much the fact that this is a normal thing. I mean, humans have been procreating for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so sex is a thing, body parts are a thing. It's not like weird, but unfortunately in our society, it's sort of made an idol.
Yeah.
It's sort of like this thing is to be exalted and celebrated, but also you're very shameful if you mess around with it or something like that.
Yeah. So that's really at the heart of it, I think, is that as parents, we've got to have kind of a sit down with ourselves and with the Lord to kind of ask him to reveal to us how we think about this and if it needs correcting. I wrote a chapter on sex and sexuality for a book a while ago. And in that, I kind of recognize what you just said, which is that we all are coming into this with some kind of perversion. Okay. Let's be humble enough to recognize it, even as simple as just selfishness. If you see sexuality from a selfish perspective, that's broken. And that is the bare minimum beginning of brokenness. And like you said, there could be so much more that we've experienced, that's been done to us, that's been taught to us. And so we got to sit with God and ask him. And I've enjoyed this so much over the years, starting in Genesis and really asking God to correct my thinking on this. And I have said to young adults, young women, as well as my own kids, but thing as simple as God designed sex. This was not man's idea. Right away, you're like, oh, especially for women, right? Because we're often victimized or sex is weaponized against us. That one will sit with you for a minute. And we almost want to push back on it. It's like, God designed sex? And it's like, okay, so we've got the bodies that God has made us. Like you said, they have sexual organs. We can talk about these things with our kids without shame. If you can't do that, you've got to bring that to God. That's the beginning step. And if you are a parent who's still got young kids or older kids and you're realizing this, then that's my prayer. If the only thing you hear today is this, begin that work with God to correct and realign the way you think about this subject so that it aligns with God's heart and God's design, because then you're going to be able to really enjoy talking to your kids about this. And you won't come at it from brokenness. You'll come at it from, this is God's design. Remember how we taught about, digestion? It starts with chewing the food. And we love to explain to our kids how their bodies work. And then when it gets to their sexual organs, we suddenly get weird. And the kids notice. And they're like, why aren't we talking about, this very obvious part of me? So,
but, if we prepare them for so much in their life, like we got to get ready for school today. Okay, you got to get this and that and that.
Yep.
Or, first day of school or whatever the preparation, we're about to start this new program or you have sports coming. Like, let's get ready for it. Let's think about it in the right way. And we coach them through it. They get on the basketball court and, they're kind of dragging a little bit. And we're going to have a corrective kind of discussion on that. And so why is this so different from all of those regular conversations that we have as they grow up? Even when you just have siblings, like, it's okay. Hey guys, privacy. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, you can't run around the house naked anymore. Okay. You gotta, let's keep that in the bathroom, get dressed there, and then come out and be with us,
And actually I meant to do this sooner because we are going to get into some more mature terminology and topics. So let this, before we get too much farther, be a disclaimer to you that there is going to be some mature content like there has been in the last couple episodes. So if you have little ears around, maybe listen to this on your headphones.
What was so funny is when we were talking about this beforehand and we're playing out, we're like, oh, we have little ears listening. But it's like, well, isn't that the whole point? Is that, aren't they supposed to be okay to hear this? Right?
So let's talk about that. Okay. So moving on from just the fact that God designed sex, okay? And actually, before we move on, I did want to say one of the reasons I think, like you were saying, why do we get weird about this one? In a healthy way, the reason why is because this is sacred. Sex and the body parts that are involved in sex, this is sacred. This is the producing of it's what causes the reproduction, creation of a soul. And we know that that Paul talks to the Corinthians about sexual immorality, and that's where he says your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So sexuality and how we use our bodies in a sexual way is sacred because it involves the body and soul and spirit of a person. It's meant to be sacred, right? So it makes sense that we could get a little awkward about it, but we want to encourage parents that research shows that if you are not the first person to talk about a subject with your kids, then you will not be their most trusted source for that, right? So that means if I wait till they're 10, 11, 12 to start talking about sex or what's going on with puberty, and I haven't talked about these things, they have already heard about it from other people. And who were those sources? You don't have that control. It could have been, Billy sitting next to them in class in first grade. It could have been looking at a tablet, someone else's tablet, or something popping up on a screen when they were in third grade. There's so much that can happen early on that can replace you as the primary source. So I think that's something we want to talk about, right? Is why is it important to talk about this early?
Yeah, because I think, a couple things with that is that, again, we all have our own stories. When did you first hear about some of these terms, these topics, these kind of things?
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that's so dangerous about our current day and age is that when we were growing up, in the 90s, really the only place we could hear about these things are other kids on the playground or like MTV. Or like what was on Saved by the Bell or something like that. You know what I mean? And that was, and it wasn't like the way it is now. We can't even, I'm trying to watch like hopefully an okay show with my kids. Hey, let's watch The Voice.
Yeah.
And the topics, because of some of the lifestyles of the singers, it's like, all right, well, let's have a little conversation about that, kids. Like, isn't that a little bit, there's homosexuality or there's someone that's trans. Is that a boy or a girl, Dad? And now we have to have those conversations right now. But when we were growing up, and the biggest thing is that now everything is a scroll. Every topic imaginable is a scroll away.
Yeah.
And so now it's so easy for them to get access to all of these topics that we don't feel like we're ready to have. But guess what? They're going to be ready to have because they're going to see it or hear it and not know what to do with that information.
Yeah. And I think that being the primary source that I remember when I first heard that, and it really hit home for me because I pride myself on kind of being that for them, where they're like, I remember my daughter asking me, where does the color brown come from? And I take it very seriously. I'm like, we're going to figure this out together. We're going to talk about light and how it's a spectrum of color and how it bounces off. And
hey, I got this prism in my pocket. Here, why don't you check?
Like, so that's always been a big thing for me, is that I want to have the answers for them. And when it comes to this, again, we've all come to it, how did my parents talk to me about it? How did your parents talk to you? And we could play the blame game. We all have our funny or sad stories about how we were taught about this, but they have theirs too. Like we could have our parents in here right now and they could tell you their experience with this. And no matter what, we're all coming at it from some kind of broken perspective. But when I came at this and someone told me that, I took it as a challenge. Like, I want to be your encyclopedia. I am Google. Because now our kids all know who Google is. It's a person who knows everything. And now with AI, it's literally like
Alexa.
a person. It's Alexa or
yeah.
Siri. Okay, so I am that. And I make that very clear to them. That means that I have to not shy away from anything. Siri and Google do not shy away from anything. If I don't have the answers, I'm going to go and find them. I've had that with my kids where they ask me a question. I go, you know what? I don't know why that is. I'm going to find out and come back to you. So we want to encourage that you should want to own this role, want to be the primary source for information and truth, because what we're talking about here is framing not only sex, but like you just mentioned, God's design for marriage, his design for our sexuality in a broader sense, and something we're going to touch on later, which is sexual integrity also, and how to teach that to kids. So this is not just biology, but it's kind of a combination. We're in charge of teaching our kids the biology of sex in a clear way, in a way that honors God, doesn't make it shameful or taboo.
Yeah.
And then we're also in charge of framing sex and sexuality within God's design for humanity. And that's quite a task. And that's why I really think it is a holy calling. I think it is very sacred, because this impacts so much in our kids' lives. So let's talk a little bit about how this impacts kids. Like, for example, if we don't talk to our kids, what are some of the repercussions that could happen down the road?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, and we'll get into it a little later when we go through kind of each age range and like what's an appropriate topic for those age ranges.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we can definitely kind of touch more in depth on those. But I think the biggest thing is that if we, as their parents, leave them unprepared. So let's just give the example. They're at recess and a classmate uses a sexual term that they've never heard before.
Yep.
Something's going to happen. First of all, and this is a normal part of life also, but they're going to be like, okay, that's something that I don't understand. And now I kind of feel ashamed about that, because now I look stupid in front of obviously my peers who know what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one kind of shame, but then the most damaging thing is if now they don't have anywhere to go with that. Now they're holding this nugget of insecurity. And they're like, well, I know mom and dad don't like talking about that. Like, there's no way I could tell them about that.
Yeah.
And so now they're holding this in. And I try to emphasize to my kids all the time, like, when you hold something like that in, when you hold that piece of shame in, when you do something wrong and you're not honest, even it applies to honesty, you know?
Of course.
That thing sits in you and it's going to like make you feel really gross. It's like a poison. It's like, when you eat poison and your body doesn't know what to do with it and it wants to throw up and not do well.
Yeah.
When you hold that kind of shame inside, it's like a poison and it's going to sit there. And so by us opening up ourselves as the arbiters of like God's reality and God's truth for these things, then they know, hey, Dad, they mentioned this at school today. Like, what does it mean? How am I going to react to that? And
can I just interject? I literally had that happen to me. We won't name names, but you probably figure out who it is. But I had one of my kids who, a kid in their class using a stuffed animal, said, did some sort of gesture with the animal, and another kid said, "Oh my gosh, he raped that animal." And my daughter said to me later on, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, what do you think it means?" She goes, "I think it has something to do with sex." I was like, okay. So the fact that happened, I was 5th grade. So kids know these words in 5th grade. Okay. Wake up. If you think they don't, please wake up. They know all the words. Some of them. Maybe your kid doesn't. Maybe they do. Or at least they've heard them and don't know, and they're holding it in. They've got that shame because they go, "This is a word. I know it's not good, but I don't know what it means, but I can't talk to mom and dad," right? But the fact that she could come and talk to me about that, and I explained to her what that word meant. And the reason I was able to explain that to her is because we had already had many conversations.
That's good.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of when to talk about stuff, but I will tell you that by 5th grade, this is a term. This is rape, abuse, pornography. These are all perversions of God's beautifully designed sex. God beautifully designed it. And these are broken, sinful, twisted versions of that. So if they don't have that beautiful, perfect, honoring design already in their hearts and in their minds, you're not going to be able to go walk them through these other things so easily. I was able to do that because we'd already had this foundation. Right. So
then your daughter knew because first of all, like that was great that you asked her, "Well, what do you think?" Because now you're starting to engage their heart, where they're at. So the thing is that she came to you about a word and a topic that she thought was related to sex.
Yeah.
Which is like, I'm going to talk to my mom about that. But you have already established yourself as, this is stuff we talk about. We can talk about even that kind of topic, versus, "Hey, I heard this strange word and it's not sex related." You know what I mean? Like, "Oh, okay, cool. Come talk to me about that." But the fact that topic isn't off limits allows us to be open. Now, I just want to touch a little more about the shame.
Yeah.
Is that, like when it comes to, we're going to feel shame about all kinds of things in our lives. You know what I mean? We were talking before about rejection, acceptance. Like these things are normal things that we all go through. Yeah. There might be different reasons why kids, adults, feel shame about these things.
Sure.
But the problem is that when there's no way to release that, no way to find resolution, healing for that shame.
Yeah.
And again, like there are so many avenues that can come from. Someone dissed you at the playground, whatever. Then that's gonna be that seed, that poison that hopefully we can be there to help resolve.
I think that's amazing because it's like shame. I think we always talk to our kids about the opposite of shame is bringing it into the light, like that shame can't live in the light. And so when we walk through stuff with our kids, whether it's about this topic or any, it's always about bringing them to a place where they're back at my worth and my value are settled. There's no question that I am loved. And you mentioned earlier too, that I'm safe. And I think that's where shame can't survive in a safe place. If your kid knows that no matter what, I can go and talk to no matter how I'm feeling or how wrong I was, or what if I'm the one who looked at porn, or I'm the one who found that word, or whatever it could be, that I'm safe with my parents, then shame cannot live. You suffocate shame when you bring it into the light. So we want, like you were saying, we want to encourage our kids to bring things into the light. Our family has to be a place where anything can be brought into the light. And that has so much to do with how we react. And that's why if we don't deal with this stuff in our hearts first, our reactions are not going to be appropriate. And kids learn really quick. They are quick studies. And if you show them who you are, they're going to believe that's who you are, and they're going to respond accordingly. So, okay, so we mentioned that if you don't talk to them, they're going to hear things from other people. But also, I think it was you who mentioned this, if we don't talk to them, they're going to be more prone to mental health issues down the road, right? Wasn't that you who was mentioning that you were
Yes.
Bryan's a statistic guy, and
Yes.
he's a big reader. You're a big reader.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find that bit.
Okay, while you find that.
But no, I don't think it's in here. But I think it was, I read an interview with a mental health professional, and she was like, over the past, she was like, okay, just in the last week, she had many kids come with, of the 10 new kids that she started seeing about anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. She found that a lot of it was related to sexuality or gender dysphoria or something like that. And then when she asked them, like, well, what do your parents think about that? Like, all of them said, well, my parents don't want to talk to me about this stuff. And that's what they had internalized. Like what you said, like whether we mean to or not, if we're not comfortable with that, if we haven't prepared ourselves, like, okay, like I'm a parent, this is part of my job.
Yeah.
I want to be that source. I have to be the one that can talk to my kids about this. Am I ready to do that?
Yeah.
Why am I not ready to do that? Because I thought that was so heartbreaking that, that she had to hear that.
Yeah.
That these kids, these poor kids who are hurting, depressed, anxious, sad, they couldn't come to their parents with that.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the result of not being able to open up about that shame, is that now there's depression, there's anxiety, and there's all of that.
Yeah. I think that's important to mention because I know there's no parents out there who want to have a negative impact on their kids.
Yeah.
But this is an area that is so far reaching. It's one little topic. Oh, it's just the sex talk. In a sense, it's almost like we want to compartmentalize it into this one little massive checkbox, and it's like, and it's done. But we know that this reaches so far into the psyche of a kid, into how they view relationships, how they view the opposite gender, how they view themselves. It is so, so important. And so we just want to encourage parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles that the way that you talk about this and the things adjacent to it, like their bodies, for example, having a healthy body image, all of these things are connected, and we shouldn't want to keep it in a little single conversation box because we are doing our kids a huge disservice if we do that. So another reason why it's important to get to this early is because of the rise of digital pornography, right? So we mentioned it already. I know previous episodes have mentioned this, but if you think that your child is safe from pornography, then you are uninformed. I don't know how else to say it, but you are wrong. Because of the digital world that we live in, through all the streaming platforms, smartphones, and all the social media, the internet, all of that means that the statistics on how early kids are likely to see pornography, it has gone to a shockingly young age. And I think, what is it now? The age that a child is likely to see pornography.
I know 8. That's the last I remember.
8 years old. So
what's that?
Second or third grade. Okay, so we say that, again, we're not trying to freak anybody out, but this is so important. Your kids are important. Their minds and their hearts are important. And so we want to say that because, again, if you think that first grade, second grade is too early to talk to your kids about God's design for their sexual organs and God's design for sex, you are wrong. I'm just going to say that with so much grace and so much I'm with you and I'm cheering you on, like you can do this, but you have to do it earlier than you think. Yeah. Right.
And I think that's a good, one of the books that we have that we would recommend. So this is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior. So this is for 3 to 5 year olds.
Yeah.
So this is basically like, it's just a plan. Like it's very simple. It's very, a couple words on each page. what do you do?
What age?
Bleach is bad.
What age is that
3 to 5.
for? 3 to 5 years old.
So bleach is bad because it's a poison, kind of like what I mentioned earlier.
Very
and
good.
then what happens if you're looking at a screen or something and
you see
there's someone with stuff that your bathing suit would normally be covered and that's exposed. Like, what do you do with that?
Yep.
And so this says, like, you teach them, you close it, you run, and you go tell an adult what you saw, and that kind of thing. So this is already 3 to 5 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what do they do when they see this and how to do that,
So again, I can hear somebody saying that's too young. And I just want to push back on that. It is not too young to prepare and protect your children. And I think that's another side of this that we haven't mentioned yet. But when we're teaching our kids about their bodies and specifically their sexual organs, it's very important that we equip our children to protect themselves. I'm very close to the child sexual abuse issue. And because of that, we've done a lot of study. I have done a lot of research on this. And one of the things that will be the most effective at preventing child sexual abuse in your kids is if they know their own body parts and they know that they can say no.
Yeah.
So the main thing here, and I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast I did with your wife, but that is teaching your kids the anatomical terms for their body parts. So instead of saying, no one should see your private parts, you should say, this is your vagina, this is your penis. Nobody should see them. Nobody should ask to see them. Nobody should touch them, and nobody should ask to touch them.
Yeah.
If you're teaching your kids about their bodies, this is not a hard thing to add to the things you're teaching them. Yep. This is just another thing you're telling your 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old little one. It doesn't have to be loaded.
Yeah.
These are not big conversations. This is in the car on your way to Chick-fil-A. Yeah. This is sitting, when you're getting dressed. Before you go to the doctors, hey, don't forget, we're going to the doctors. He's going to see your tummy. He's going to poke around. He's going to look at your private parts. Remember, your private parts are, and then you say the anatomical words for those private parts.
Yeah. And it takes a little bit to get used to, saying the real words, but like when I'm washing my son or my daughter and I'll be like, all right, I'm washing your back and we're washing your butt and you're washing your penis and we're washing your legs. It's just another part, just like the rest of you.
We're grown-ups, get over it.
Yeah.
Use the words, teach your kids their body parts because it could be the thing that protects them in God forbid.
Right.
But the statistics are high when it comes to abuse of children. Let's not let our kids be a part of that. Equip them. Yeah.
And I think how does that help? You know what I mean? So so say with us, if you call it like your cookies or something like that, you know what I mean? I think that's an example, right? Yep. You have a funny word for that. Now if someone touches your daughter inappropriately and she randomly tells some adult, Johnny touched my cookies. They're going to have no idea what that means. Yeah. Cool. Yep. Cookies are great. You know what I mean? They don't know what that means.
No red flag will
No red flag will come up. But if they only know the correct term for that, when it comes out of their mouth randomly somewhere, someone's going to be like, no one should ever touch you there. Yeah. And then now things can start moving and it's not like unfound.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, abuse. That comes all the way down to police reporting. Yep. Prosecuting, it needs to be accurate. Yep. Another good example of that, my son used to think that babies come out of butts. And I had to explain to him, no, babies come out of vaginas. Yeah. Those are two different things.
Or as my daughter sometimes says, the front butt.
Yeah. So these are fun. Can I just say, these are fun conversations. Yeah. When I corrected my son about this, I wasn't upset. It was just like, no, bud, that's not right. Remember, girls have these body parts, boys have these. And I talk about it. And again, I have enjoyed this. Yeah. Can I just say, I just want to look into the camera to the people listening and say, I have enjoyed talking to my kids about sex. I can say that because it has been fun to shed my own issues with this, my own discomfort, and look into the face of my sweet, innocent little kid, my little girl and my little boy, and talk to them about their bodies and how He's incredible. The way how babies are made. Why would we shy away from talking about how they were created?
Yeah.
Why would we bring any shame, any discomfort into that? And so this is not like anything special, but this is a homeschool resource that we had when we were homeschooling. It's an Usborne book. It's called the Illustrated Elementary Science Dictionary. And it's not only about reproduction or sex. It's just a book on science. But what I liked about this is, and I would say when your kids are 3, 4, and 5, you can already be reading through this level of science. It talks about seeds. It talks about how germination works. The sex talk is often called the birds and the bees. The reason for that is because cross-pollination of flowers is the way that fertilization happens. That's how reproduction happens in nature for plants.
I just got it. Thank you.
Did you not know that?
I never connected those dots. That's why the birds and the... Wait, where the birds come from? What about the birds?
Well, I was
thinking bees and flowers. Okay.
The birds are part of that too, like hummingbirds. But this is nature. This is God's design. So we talk about nature, and then we get into the human bodies. And again, it's not a tough leap because we've already talked about how it works in flowers.
Yep.
And actually, when you look at teaching about flowers, I'm trying to find the right page.
Well, just in the car the other day, I forget, like this week, I was talking to the kids, and I was like, oh, it's kind of like, I don't know, but I mentioned, kids don't get out of the way when kids have to climb over to get in the back seat. Mm-hmm. So one of my sons got, kind of nailed in his testicles, you know what I mean? Man. As he's climbing over the seat. And I'm like, come on, man. Don't you want nieces and nephews? You can't be doing stuff like that. And he's like, what do you mean, Dad? And it's like, well, the sperm comes out of that and meets so it's like, okay, I need to, looks like there's some topics to revisit with them, because there's a little bit of lacking knowledge here. So but me being like I should be able to explain this to them. You know what I mean? Yeah. I can say that because this is our biology. This is how it works. And that's an opportunity. Hey, all right, let's revisit this because apparently I didn't explain this so well last time. So
So I mean, we're running out of time. So I do want to make sure we cover this. We did have just a brief little look at like age ranges and what you could expect or what you should expect to be able to talk and introduce, different topics to your kids. But before we do that, I haven't mentioned it yet, but there is a concept rather than we mentioned the one big sex talk. Yeah. There's an organization called the Birds and the Bees. I love their Instagram account. I highly recommend it. I've learned a lot from them. They're an organization that helps parents talk to their kids about sex and from a biblical perspective. They're excellent, and they have courses and all kinds of stuff. We'll link that in the notes. But I did want to mention one of the things that they often say is rather than planning to have the sex talk, you should be having drip, drip, drip conversations. So that means a little here, a little there. You're building. Think about how we learn biology. When you're in second grade, you learn the basics. You're learning. It's not like we're not teaching them anything, but they're not ready for the structure, the atomic structure of a cell. They're not ready for that. But we talk to them about plants and how they're made and how they grow and the seasons. And as they progress in intellectual ability, we build on that. It should be the same when it comes to your kids and their body and sex. So it's a drip, drip conversation. And that's why when, if one of your kids comes to you and they have a question, you've already had lots of conversation. So it wouldn't be weird for them to come to you. Yeah. If you wait and you have one big conversation or even like 3 big conversations, that makes it feel like a big deal.
That's good.
I got to wait for the right time to tell mom or dad or ask them this question. But if it's a drip, drip where you're always kind of touching on it in different ways and adding complexity as they age, it's just going to make it that much more easy for them to come and say, hey, I heard this thing. What does this mean? Yeah. So I wanted to mention the drip, drip concept because that has helped me so much.
Yes.
And that's what we kind of want to break down is if you're looking at it through this idea of a gradual building blocks, like all education works, then you can look at, it's two things. Sexual education for our kids should include the biology as well as the spiritual education here.
Yep.
And that is, the biology is how things work, break it down, terminology, anatomical parts, the mechanics of sex, all of those things need to be taught. But then there's also this phrase that you brought up, which is sexual integrity, which is the spiritual side of this, how to honor God and ourselves with our bodies.
Yep.
This is also a drip, drip, drip conversation, right? And talking about their body parts in a way that's not, you're not embarrassed of them, is laying this beautiful foundation that, yep, that's a part of your body. This is how it works. This is, and as they get older, this is what it's for. Yep. And as they get even older, and this is how that thing that's a part of you works and what it's for. And you're just building, and all of it is honoring God and building and encouraging your kids to have sexual integrity, which I love that phrase.
Yeah.
So you want to, I don't know, break it down a little bit?
Right. Let's just try to hit through, because we don't have a whole lot of time left.
I know.
Okay, so I'm going to try to go quick through. All right, so my kid is this age. What kind of stuff should they know?
Yeah.
How should I drip these concepts in? And
we've mentioned some.
Yeah, and we can link to. I had this great resource that really breaks it down by age, so we can link that in the show notes. So 0 to 2 years old, we want to be talking about body parts, biological terms, very straightforward.
Yeah.
We see with our eyes and etc. You know what I mean? Then 3 to 5, now we're going to expand. We're starting at the foundation, and now we're going to expand on that. So 3 to 5 years old, a big thing for abuse prevention is what's a good touch, what's a bad touch. You know what I mean? So good touches, boundaries, like whenever our kids say stop, and we stop whatever's going on. Like if we're tickling and we're having fun and they're laughing, but they say stop, they know dad's going to stop.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So if you want me to keep tickling you, don't say stop, So they understand that.
The term for that is bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
That means you are in charge of your body.
Yeah.
You don't get to touch me unless I say yes.
Yeah.
Right?
And so what that means now is that when someone violates that, they know that's a big red flag. Because mom and dad taught me that if I say stop and you don't listen, that's really bad. Yep. And then I'm going to go tell somebody that I said stop and you didn't listen.
Very good.
Privacy, nudity, and when nudity is appropriate. This is 3 to 5 years old.
These are natural. I mean, these conversations are going to come up
all the time. You can, so this is where maybe birds and bees questions could start coming up.
Yep.
And then you can, again,
where do babies
at that
come
appropriate,
from?
They know that it comes out of a vagina,
Yep.
They might not know how it gets there, but as they come through with questions, you gotta be ready for that.
Yes. And I could just say, just to break it down a little bit more, when you're talking to a 3, 4, or 5-year-old about sex, you can say they want to know where a baby comes from.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about sex the way that you are. They don't know that there's ways that it can be abused yet.
Yes,
they also don't know
point.
that it's pleasurable. That's an important aspect that you need to recognize is again, remove yourself from the equation and just enjoy teaching them these facts.
Yeah.
And as they get older, you will add on additional information and complexity till they have a really clear, crisp, full picture of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, 6 to 8. Now we're starting maybe more of the other book, the more advanced good pictures, bad pictures, pornography.
Yep.
Sort of you need to be ready when they are exposed to pornography.
Yes. Yep.
More body safety skills. Let's see, gender and sexual identities. This is a topic. 6 to 8 years old, we have to already start talking about this stuff.
Yes.
But they see it. It's around and it's everywhere.
Yep.
9 to 12. All right, now we're in tween land. Okay.
By this time, your kids should know. They should know the mechanics of sex.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That should already be there.
Yeah. And puberty. So that's a huge part of shame.
Yeah.
Is that these things are happening to my body, especially I think girls, like moms and girls, maybe it's a little more you kind of have to help them out with some of these things,
Yes.
right? But with boys, like all of a sudden maybe hair, or like you start noticing, like I'm starting to notice in my boys, like their attitudes are shifting, and maybe they're getting a little bit more testosterone. They're sort of becoming a little more combative.
Yeah.
They might start noticing girls. They might start getting hair in places. They might. So you could be ashamed about these things if we don't help them and talk to them about it.
Oh, very good.
So yeah,
That's a good point too about puberty is really cool because it's literally their body preparing to become sexually active.
yeah,
So something that was very abstract, it's like, who's having sex? Not me, I'm a kid.
yeah,
What's happening here is your body is preparing to be able to reproduce.
wow,
For the boy, it's being ready to produce sperm that it could fertilize an egg. And for the girl,
Yeah.
it's being able to have eggs that can be fertilized
Right.
and grow a uterus grow a placenta that grows a baby.
yeah. Let's
It's
just
huge.
let's just say, like, even like for a boy, like it's natural for a boy to have wet dreams. Like, but if you don't talk to him about that, all of a sudden now there's a big mess in my bed, and
Yeah.
who can I talk to about this? Like,
Yeah.
I feel ashamed. I mean, the percentage is probably shockingly low. What father has talked to their pubescent
Yeah.
son
Oh,
about what
man.
happens when you have a wet dream? And now
Yeah.
there's this kernel of shame that could start billowing into something.
Yep. Can I say too, during the 9 to 12 range is also a really good time to talk to your girls about what's going on with them and their bodies, and also what's going on with boys, and to talk to boys about what's going on with girls.
Yeah.
Again, this removes the shame. It also helps having a little bit more empathy and compassion towards the opposite sex. I have found that, at least in my experience. I've walked my daughters through what the boys in their grades are going through.
That's helpful.
And,
I'm sure.
Maybe give them a break a little bit, and also understand that it's all normal.
Because
It's
now
all
they're like,
normal.
now they just start acting weird because they start liking girls, but they don't know what that means. And so they're awkward. So just know that they're going to be weird,
Yeah.
So that's
So can I ask you, because we're running out of time, but as a father, because I did want to get to this point, I think the bulk of the work falls on mothers to talk to kids, usually because they're the main caregiver at home for those early years, which is when you're going to start introducing topics like body parts and sex and everything. So moms, your role is important, but I want to ask you to speak to fathers, and what do you think their role is in all of this? I'd just love to hear your perspective on
I mean,
that.
obviously it's sort of as the man and being an expert on what it means to be a man,
Yeah.
you're modeling that.
Yes.
And a lot of it is in our minds. Like, really, it's like, how do we think through things that are challenging? How do we think through, questions that we have about our bodies and that kind of thing? And so it's continuing to be a partner with
Yeah.
my wife on modeling that understanding, that openness, and just really kind of taking, with the boys, it's like, I'm going to take them on a hike. Like, one thing about boys is boys like to be active in doing something. They don't like just sitting down across from one
Right,
another
right.
and chatting.
Yeah.
They want to, let's be kicking the soccer ball around, or let's go on a hike. That's what I did when I kind of really, let's really talk about sex and we had a bigger than drip talk, about sex. But,
more of a
hey,
rite
let's
of-
get out of
rite
the
of
house. Let's
passage.
get out of the ordinary, and let's just have a little chat about this.
Yep.
But we did it outside, at the reservoir, going on a hike. Hey, let me explain. What kind of questions do you have about this? So it's, I just feel, the father gets to have that with the sons more so.
How about with the daughters?
Yeah. And there'll be time for that. Noelle's
Yeah.
4, so I haven't had to think about that very much.
Yeah. But it's
yeah.
important, right?
Yeah.
The way that a father
Yeah.
treats his
And I think especially as our children start going through puberty and their bodies change.
Yeah.
Like, as a father, we have to be so careful not to begin to, she's becoming a bit like a woman.
Yeah.
So I don't want to embrace her like my little girl anymore. So I'm going to be a little more standoffish.
Yeah.
That
That's
could
not
be
good.
really harmful.
Yeah.
We need to exhibit healthy love
Yeah.
for our daughters.
Yeah.
And so we want to embrace them and listen to them and talk to them just like we did when they were 3 years old, because they want to be like, okay, that's a man. That's what a man is like, and that's how a man treats me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to look for that. Now, first of all, I don't need to look for that sort of perverted sort of attention love elsewhere because I'm going to get it from my dad.
That's so important. I think that's huge because I know we're a little over. Is it okay? He sighed and gave us a thumbs up. For girls who have fathers who love them in a non-sexual, healthy, unconditional way, the research is so clear on how much that benefits a young girl.
Wow.
And I can speak to that. I'm so blessed that my father was one of those types of fathers who showed me what it is to be loved and to be respected. And so I didn't look elsewhere. So fathers, we're just encouraging you, and mothers, of course, to lean into these conversations. And if you feel like you're late to the game as we're closing here, but if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by what we've said, or God forbid, guilty, that first of all is the last thing we want. But this is a call to all of us. Like I said earlier, like I'm cheering you on in this, that wherever you are in this, get started, right? It's not too late. These are relationships. Our children are our dearest responsibility, and we have a relationship with them. Those can change, they can grow, they can improve. And if this is an area that you need help in, and you recognize that, then that's an amazing place to be. Find wiser and more seasoned people, parents that you respect, and start to be bold in asking the questions, and then enjoy introducing God's heart and God's design to your kids when it comes to sex, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's all the time we have. I knew this was going to fly by. I told you, didn't I?
I know. I was like, gosh, what are we going to talk about for?
So we went a little long, but we really hope this has been encouraging. And if you are in Baltimore and you're a parent, we're here if you want to talk to us. And if you're listening and you're not a parent, but you think this is going to be helpful to somebody, please share this episode with the parents in your lives, because we really know that this can change a kid's life from the very beginning when it comes to these things. So, Bryan, thank you for joining me.
Awesome.
And thanks for joining us today, all you listeners. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen or watch, and share this episode, and keep tuning in as we keep talking about sex and sexuality all this week. Thanks, Bryan.
Thanks.